This movie is all over the place. I loved it though.
Welcome to Movie Night with the Boys.
Hi, I'm John,
And I'm Zach.
and we're Movie Night with the Boys, a weekly podcast where we discuss movies. This week, we're talking about The Harder They Fall, a 2021 film directed by James Samuel. And I really do hope I'm saying that right.
The weird spelling.
It is very unique. I've never seen that actual spelling before, and I think he had something to do with the score too, so I'm wondering if he's not a director background, because the soundtrack I think he had a lot to do with. Um, so the movie is starring, and this is a little bit of a list, but I've got Jonathan Majors, who played Nat Love, Idris Elba, who played Rufus Buck, Zazie Beetz, who played Stagecoach Mary, Regina King, who played Trudy. What was it, Treacherous Trudy? They called her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Lakeith Stanford played Cherokee Bill. R.J. Seiler played Jim Beckworth. Danielle Dendweiler played Cuffy. Eddie Gathegi played Bill Pickett. Delroy Lindo, that's a big callback to the one, played Bass Reeves. Damon Wayans Jr. played Monroe Grimes. And Dion Cole played Wiley. I went through that list a little bit long because a lot of those names are actually bigger than I realized. Zazie Beetz is one of the ones that needs a little bit mention. Obviously, Jonathan Majors, everyone knows him from what he's been in now recently. We got Loki, where he's played the one who or he who remains. Idris Elba really needs no introduction. But Zazie Beetz, she was Domino in Deadpool, and she was also Sophie in The Joker. Regina King, I didn't watch the Watchmen show, but she was Angela in the Watchmen show.
She's also the voice of Riley and his brother in the Boondocks.
No shit.
Yeah.
That's cool. She was also in the first Friday movie.
Yeah. Ice Cube's sister.
Yep. Lakeith Stanford, Cherokee Bill there, he played, I don't know what he played, I never saw the movies, but he was in Judas and the Black Messiah, Get Out, and Uncut Gems. A handful of really, really well-known flicks. R.J. Seiler was in the Power Rangers movie.
Yeah, he's Billy, plays Billy Cranston, the Blue Ranger.
Yeah. Danielle Dendweiler was also in the Watchmen show. Eddie Gathegi was in X-Men First Class, which I didn't realize it until I looked it up, but he was one of my favorite characters that wasn't one of the main characters.
He's Darwin, yeah.
Yeah. And he was in the Blacklist, and I totally missed that, but that's one of my favorite shows, and he's in that show. And yeah, so obviously everyone knows the Wayans brothers. That's Damon Wayans Jr. Everyone knows Damon Wayans from classic spoof films and hilarious comedies. And Dion Cole is another big name that everyone should know. So when an outlaw finds out that his parents' killer is being pardoned, he reforms his gang to take him out once and for all. And that would lead me to tell you that it is story time.
All right, so The Harder They Fall, 2021. The movie opens up with words on the screen. While events of this story are fiction, these people existed. So we cut to a farm and a family sitting down for a meal. We hear a knock on the door. When they open the door, the guy's completely like shocked, and Buddy just kind of walks past him and walks into the house. Then we see him. We see the mom and the kid, and they're sitting there. And the guy walks up and he goes and he puts his two gold revolvers down on the table and sits down. So as the dad walks back to the table, he's saying, "You know, this is between you and me. Let my family go." and we see another man walk up and put his hands on the boy's shoulders, and we see a scorpion tattoo on his hand, right? Then the guy with the guns, you know, shoots the mom. The dad gets pissed off, rushes, shoots the dad, and then gets a straight razor and carves a cross into the kid's head, right?
Savage.
Yeah. So then we cut to sometime later in Salinas, Texas. At a church, we see a man walk in and he starts, saying, "Oh, you got to give me, my collection. You know what happens if I don't get my money?" And then we see this guy stand up and he's not a priest, right? So the other guy is like, What the hell's going on?" You know what I mean? So So the guy who's crouched starts saying, "I'm here looking for a scorpion," right? Tells the guy, "Okay, I'm looking for you." And they have this like little stare off. The guy says, "Oh, that was the past." And then Buddy starts shooting. So with each shot, we get the little bit of the title. So, you know, the one shot, two shot, harder, three shot, they, fourth shot, fall, right? As the guy hits the ground, which I have to say, I do enjoy the cinematography of this movie. It was really well done, right? Like they didn't really cut to black at anything. It was just kind of just like flowing scenery or like the stuff would pop up over the background. Like it was really good. It
Yeah.
was really
So
good.
really quick before we carry on, I have a couple things that I wanted to point out from that scene. One, what the fuck was that gun? Because holy shit, the first shot, okay, he took a fine, he hit back, but this dude got launched up and shot down with bullets. Like he video game juggled him with bullets,
Well,
and it
for one,
was
the movie does a lot of over exaggerating, but also too,
yes.
um, those guns are strong, man. Like you get
I
dropped
mean,
by
I
those
guess.
guns. Like those are revolvers, you know what I mean? They're not little pistols, right? So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I didn't see a problem with that.
I found it funny. I just found it entertaining.
So he kills this guy, and we find out that this is the kid from the beginning of the movie. We see the cross scar on his head, and the priest kind of pops out and asks if it's over, and he tells him, "Okay, you could keep the guy. He's worth 5,000." And the priest's like, "Well, why don't you want him?" And he's like, "'Cause I'm worth 10." And then he bounces. And then we cut to what would normally be the title card, but it's like kind of a flash of all the actors and stating the characters that they play, right? Random scenes, I guess.
Yeah,
So then we cut to a gang of red hooded guys riding their horses, and then they get caught up in kind of like a blockade. And then this is where we end up meeting Bill Pickett and Jim, right? And basically, they kill everybody. They leave one guy alone. They steal from bank robbers and stuff. So they steal from other criminals, I guess. Um,
yeah.
yeah. And so the one guy that they leave alone tells them like, "Oh, you don't know whose money this is. Like this isn't just a bank job." So we cut to Douglas Town as Nat rides through to Mary's saloon, where Nat is stopped at the door by this like little dude who's, I don't know, I guess the bouncer tells him to check his guns, and we find out this is Cuffy.
Copy,
Cuffy was her name, yeah.
copy.
Um, yeah. And then these two guys try and come in after, and they're like, "Fuck off! I'm not giving you my gun." So she pulls out some brass knucks and beats the fuck out of them.
He wrecks those dudes.
Yeah, she kicked the shit out of them.
Then
So
she was like, get them out of here. They can have their guns back when they leave town.
yeah, give the guns to the sheriff. They can have them when they leave.
She's a beast.
So then we see Mary walk out on the stage and, she does this little song,
Yeah.
right? And then so after the song, we see Nat and Mary, and they have some kind of relationship. And not a good one because she fucking drops him. Like she punches him in the face and he was like, "Oh yeah," yeah," and then he fucking falls over,
He tried to
knocks him.
tough guy through that shit.
Yeah, that shit was great. She put him right on his ass. So so Mary walks away, tells Cuffy to clean him up, and then basically Cuffy sends him up to her room. And they then we see like that was, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a front for people. I don't understand, but basically they started fucking making out. They're about to bone, and they get interrupted by Pickett, right? And so Pickett comes and he's like, "You got to see this." So we cut to the barn with the last survivor of like the Red Hoods, and he tells them that Rufus Buck is getting out, and they robbed like the money that they stole from the Red Hoods was Rufus money essentially. So then Nat just kind of lets him go. Um, Says, it's the Red Crimson Hood gang. What's one person? You know what I mean? Something along those lines, right? Um, so then we cut to a gang riding towards a train, and this is where we meet Trudy Smith, and Cherokee Bill, and they end up stopping the train. They board it, and we get a cool little like fisticuff moments where you see how dirty these fucking guys are, and he grabs a knife and he ends up slicing up this dude,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
It was pretty cool. So they proceed through the train and they find this young officer, and basically they get him to drop his gun, and they ask him all his questions. They use him essentially and get him to they basically he brings them to the car where whatever these guys are looking for is, right? So they uses the kid to get him to open the door. They shoot him a couple times, and we find out that the kid is the kind of captain officer's son. So basically he opens up. So after they're in the car, this is where we find out that Rufus has been pardoned, and and his gang as well. And the reason they got pardoned was basically the general wanted them to take care of a crooked officer in their ranks. So essentially they were hired to kill that guy, and Rufus gets out.
Hmm.
So they let Rufus out, and basically he just orders his men to kill everybody except for that same kid who's the only one who can, kind of drive the train, I guess. I
Yep.
don't know, right? So we cut back to Mary's saloon where we see Marshall Bass Reeves walks in, and he refuses to give up his guns, and he's like, "I have a badge, so I don't need to do shit that you say. I don't have to give you my weapons." So then he walks over to Nat, and this is where he lets Nat know that Rufus got the pardon and that he's free. So we see them kind of talking in the background, and then Nat throws a drink in his face, and then there's this whole thing, and basically Nat gets arrested and taken out. So then we cut to Redwood City, where we see Rufus and his gang riding through. They meet with the banker. The banker tells them about the Red Hood gang situation, and basically the bank doesn't have money to cover what they just lost. So then they set off to go see the sheriff, I think, right? And then we see Wiley sitting down in his office, I guess, eating a steak, talking shit. Like I thought he was actually talking to Rufus for a second,
Yeah, I did too. I was like, this
right?
motherfucker's ballsy.
Yeah. So then you see his, I guess, his officers come up and say, Rufus wants a meeting with you. And Buddy's like, "Well, tell him to fuck off. I got nothing to say." And they pull a gun on him and basically force him outside. and is like, yeah, you don't have a choice. Basically, they have a little bit of back and forth. Then we find out that kind of Wiley betrayed Rufus. So they go start throwing hands, right? Rufus or Wiley kind of cheap shots him quick times and throw a couple more hands. And then Rufus kind of grabs his pistol and just starts pistol whipping the fuck out of Wiley, right? It was pretty
I thought
badass.
for
Like,
sure he was gonna kill him.
no, he said when he walked out, he said, "You can't kill me." Da da da. And he stated the reasons, right? So he's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, okay, I can't kill you, I guess."
Huh.
Right. So then he tells Wiley to get out of town. Then we cut to a wagon where Bass Reeves has Nat and he lets him out. And this is where we find out that I guess when they cut away and we couldn't hear them talking, they made a plan to, take him out. So they basically are teamed up right now. And this is where we find out that like his whole gang has been following them, right? And they're called the Nat Love Gang. So the gang's following him. Nat tells him to leave, like there's no coming back from this, and they're all like, "Yeah, no, we're coming. Like we're your squad." Right? So, and then we also learn that Jim wants to take on Cherokee Bill because Cherokee Bill is apparently the fastest draw, and the kid thinks that he has the fastest draw. So like that's kind of his motivation for doing what he's doing, which is kind of stupid.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
but hey, it's the Wild West, right?
Yep.
So then they all head out to Redwood. So we cut back to Rufus and Trudy. Hold on. Achoo!
Bless you.
Whew. Felt that one coming from a mile away. Okay. So we cut back to Rufus and Trudy, and they're talking about how they want to make Redwood the promised land. And so they end up heading outside and they address the townspeople, tell them they need money. So they're going to charge a tax and they need $50,000, right? And basically everyone has no choice and they're going to have to basically give them everything so they can get the money that they need for making this place a paradise, I guess. I didn't really catch the plan. We cut to the Nat Love gang who we see are sitting down at a fire with Wiley, and I guess they kind of make a deal, let him go for information essentially. So we cut to the Nat Love gang later that night, and they're just like shooting the shit. And we see Nat and Mary, they're off on their own, and they're having a little back and forth. And we find out that Mary is planning to go into town on her own, right? And that's basically it. She wants to go scout because she doesn't trust Wiley's like information.
Yeah.
So Nat, upset about this, actually ends up proposing to her, and she ends up turning him down, but tells him, I'm gonna be here with you for now, right? And they start making out.
You have so many mixed signals.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. So then we cut to Mary, and she's now in Redwood, and she ends up being stopped by Trudy and her guys, right? And Mary tells them that she has a deal to offer them, so they end up bringing her into Rufus. Rufus is basically like, "Yeah, I'm not stupid. You showing up the day the Red Hoods get robbed, like, yeah, I'm not an idiot." And they knock her out and tie her to a chair, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we cut back to Nat, and he's kind of like watching over the town, and I'm guessing he's like, "All right, something's off," right? So then I guess he goes and heads back to get the guys.
Well, she
Then
said
we,
she'd be back by sunup, and he was staring there, and it was daytime, and she wasn't back yet.
yeah. So we cut back to Mary tied to the chair, and I don't think at least not yet, but we get a little bit of background on Trudy and as fucked up as she is, right? Her sister and polio, and she slit a little girl's throat, basically.
Beast,
Basically. So then,
beast, beast.
to get to the point of it, her whole story was to say Hope should die, And so she starts ending like, so we see this guy come up behind Mary and start choking her, and then she goes, but not today. And then they stop, so they grab her, throw her out into the street. So as she's laying on the street, Trudy tells one of her henchmen to put a bullet in her head if nobody comes for her by morning. And as she says that, we get the Love Gang roll up, and basically Nat kind of sacrifices himself. Essentially, he tells the guys to go back to camp, and essentially they take him and they string him up in, I guess, the jail, and they literally just start beating the shit out of him, right? And then they just, randomly stop, and we hear some footsteps, and it turns out to be Rufus. Rufus comes in, and then they have their conversation. Rufus tells Nat the reason why he cut him is so that he could recognize him when he comes back to him, right? So Rufus, yeah. So Rufus tells him to
Totally
repay what he
missed that.
stole by Friday and add $10,000 in interest. Nat's like, well, how the hell am I supposed to get $10,000? And he says, well, rob a bank, right? And gives him a little gift, and the gift actually turns out to be the straight razor that gave him the scar on his forehead in the first place. So we cut back to Nat with the gang, and he's explaining they're gonna rob a bank. And they're like, what kind of bank is gonna have that money? And they're like, in a white town, because they'll have 10K in a bank. So we so this is where we find out that Cuffy's a woman, and so they end up dressing her up in like this kind of red coat dress thing. Oh, heading out to Maysville, right? So we cut to Maysville. Nat and Cuffy ride into town, and they enter the bank, and we see like on the screen it says Maysville, and then in small little brackets it says it's a white town. Uh, so as they awkwardly walk into the bank, Cuffy asks the teller to make a withdrawal, and the bank teller is just a piece of trash and just starts like
Smiling and laughing.
laughing hard as shit in her face, right? And tells her she should go to a town like Redwood, and open an account over
What a
there,
bitch. What a bitch.
right? So Cuffy's like, yeah, well, that's not the kind of withdrawal I'm talking about. And so you see her kind of struggle with her dress for a minute, and she
That's
ends up,
funny.
yeah, so she ends up pulling out her gun, right? And okay, okay, so Cuffy pulls her gun, and there's a small like standoff, and basically they get out with the money, right? I don't know how much. I guess they got exactly the 10K they needed, whatever, right? So they end up taking off, and so we pick back up with the gang, and they're all looking at the cash, and then Wiley kind of shows up, and he's got a whole bunch of guns and ammo and TNT, right? So then we cut back to Redwood, and somebody's watching the gang kind of roll in, right? With like through a sniper scope, essentially.
Mhm.
And so then we see like Bass is riding in, like he's got his wagon thing. So I guess they're trying to play it off like the money's in the wagon, whatever the case may be. But then they end up so then we see Bill Pickett, and he goes up on a roof and knocks a dude out or kills him. I don't know. Probably kills him.
Probably
But
will.
yeah, so then he ends up getting into position. I guess he's their long rifleman. Yeah, so Bass ends up calling over Cherokee Bill, and as Pickett sets up on the roof, right, he ends up shooting and blowing up the wagon, kind of scaring off the townsfolk. So then, nobody's kind of around to get in the way of their gunfight, essentially, that they're about to have, right? So Nat ends up showing up with Cuffy and the actual money and a lot of explosives. in the same little, trolley thing, whatever the hell you want to call it. Um, and Nat tells them to bring out Mary and unhook the horses. And he ends up heading back to like go towards Mary. And this is where Cherokee Bill pulls his gun out and he's aiming it at his back. And Nat's like, "Oh, really? In the back?" And then he's like, "Are we gonna stand for that, Jim?" So, so this is where Jim shows up behind and he's pointing a gun at Cherokee Bill and essentially challenges him to like a standoff, right? I don't know what you call it. They're standoffs, right?
Standoff, yeah.
Yeah. So basically he's counting down like super slow. He's looking at his gun and shit, and then as soon as he gets to like 3 and he looks over at Cherokee shoots him in the head, right?
Fucking right in the mouth, right in the face.
So yeah, so after this cheap shot, Pickett, starts screaming Jim and fucking ends up just shooting and blowing up the money, right?
Kind
And
of started the whole thing.
yeah, and we see him kill another. He kills the sniper dude that we seen earlier in the scene,
Right through the
right?
scope.
Yeah, it was pretty badass. And then basically the gunfight starts and Trudy ends up like running off, right? And then we see Nat kind of ride in to Mary and they do this like quick little back to back like gunfire thing, you know what I mean? And then Mary's like, "All right, Trudy's mine," and she takes off after Trudy, right? So we see that the two of them and they have this nice like little brawl and it keeps kind of cutting in and out between the brawl. We see a little bit of the brawl between the two of them and scenes of like Nat killing like a whole bunch of dudes. Then we see another scene of them brawling and then it cuts back to like Bass killing a couple dudes, right? And it just keeps bouncing back and forward um between that, right? And then we see Pickett at one point gets hit with some shrapnel like in the shoulder. So then we pick back up with Mary and Trudy, and Mary finally gets the upper hand. And like, I didn't think she killed her, right? But like, she just like, finally gets a hold of her gun and just fucking smashes her in the face, right? A whole bunch of blood splatters on the barrel beside them, but I didn't think that was enough to kill her. So then we cut back to Nat, and he ends up actually being shot, and I'm assuming he got shot by that Red Hood dude that he let go, right? Because he said some shit like,
Exhale.
"Oh, yeah, right." So right before Buddy's about to kill Nat, Bass comes and shoots dude in the head and grabs Nat and kind of runs to cover. So then we pick up with like Wiley and we see Wiley is inside the house where Rufus is, right? And two guys are shooting out the window, kind of pinning down Bass and Nat, and he blows them up with a stick of dynamite, right? Then he goes and Idris Elba comes downstairs and confronts Wiley, and he basically shoots the bag of explosives and just blows up Wiley, and that's that. That's the end of Wiley. um,
Such a boom. Such a boom.
yeah. So then we see a whole bunch of other Red Hoods kind of show up, and Nat kind of pictured his mom or something, and he just kind of snapped and just went out there and just like fucked them all up. Like he killed all of those Red Hoods on his own, right? And he did a little bit of ring around the rosy around a horse and then fucking blew the guy away. Then we see Pickett kick in a window, climb in the house, and him and Cuffy, um, they kind of like regroup and like Pickett's chatting and he pulls out his lucky coin and there's a bullet in it. And he's like, "Oh, wouldn't be damned." And then all of a sudden he gets shot in the back, right?
What a
And
dick.
right. So he gets shot in the back um, by Cherokee, right? And you know, Cuffy just starts screaming essentially like, "You're a piece of garbage. You shoot him in the back. He didn't have a chance." So the two of them go and have like this kind of standoff. And I guess I did forget to mention this earlier, but when the gang was shooting the shit by the fire there, she said she knew somebody faster than Cherokee and Jim, right? And they're like, "Who?" And she was like, "I look at them every day in the mirror." So basically, she was saying she's the fastest. And at this point, we actually see that she pulled faster and kills Cherokee Bill, shoots him right in the throat. Pretty fucking gnarly shot, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then she's like, but Jim was faster.
We cut back to Nat finally confronting Rufus, where Rufus essentially tells him that his father was a good man, but his own father was not. He was an outlaw, he killed his mother, he took everything, and he left. He then it goes on to explain that he kept looking and looking until he finally found him. And when he found him, his father had a new family and a 10-year-old son, right? And that his father is his like they have the same father. So they are
Yeah.
technically brothers,
Brothers.
right? And
And
he
I was
said
like,
that
oh shit, no way, no fucking way.
yeah, it's a pretty good twist. It's a pretty good twist. Um so essentially he left the kid alive as essentially payback to his father because his father was trying to run from the outlaw life and like he's like look at you now, you're everything that dad hated or dad was trying to get away from, and look, I
Mm-hmm.
look at what I did to you.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he also say that he couldn't, that he was like, that Nat was the better guy because he couldn't kill his brother?
No, you're gonna be an even better outlaw than me because I couldn't kill my little brother.
That's what it was.
And basically ends up taunting him and, makes him kill him, shoots him repeatedly, like, wastes the whole all whatever how many rounds a revolver holds? 7, 8,
Like
6? I
five
don't
or
know,
six, I think.
right? And just shoots him all the time, and then we see him go into the pockets, take his mother's ring, right? And goes outside, regroups with everybody. Then we cut to and we see there's a grave for Bill and Jim, and then we see Nat. And so I guess Nat's faking his death, right? And Bass is gonna, vouch for him, say he's dead, right? And then him and Mary take off together, and we cut to the end credits. And that's the movie. Harder they fall.
Did you see the little bit after that when they showed the person with the bowler hat walking away?
Yeah, I must have just missed that, but I guess they were saying Trudy's alive.
Yeah, that's what I'd have to assume based on.
So that answers my earlier question of did she die from that hit in the face like Wyatt like, but yeah, okay. But okay.
Yep. Answer to your question. Well, Zach, what'd you think?
I fucking love this movie. This movie is great. Like I love it.
It was
I
a pretty
loved it.
fantastic movie. It's definitely for me re-inspired my interest in westerns, which I used to not really care for. A long while ago, I used to enjoy them. I guess it really depends on who's in it.
Yeah, I mean they don't really make too many westerns nowadays, right?
No, they certainly don't. They
Okay.
certainly don't. So now it's time for the good, the bad, and the
Meh.
Zach, your movie. What was good for you?
Um, the acting was great, but I have to say my good is definitely the music, bro. The fucking music was fire. Like, I love that. Like, soundtrack for this movie, instant Spotify, save that shit. So, yeah, definitely the music. What about you?
Exactly what you're saying, man. The acting was absolutely phenomenal.
So, John, what about your meh?
Sir, my meh was the overly fake blood. It was just so fake. And every single time I saw blood splatter, I was like, meh, eh, they could
I
have done
guess.
better. They could have done better. Meh.
I
So,
guess.
yeah, that's it for me. What about you, sir?
No meh for me.
No.
No.
Oh,
I
well,
really I don't know, I like this movie. I don't mind, like, corny blood and stuff. Like, I grew up on those old ass horror movies, man, like, you
that's
know.
fair. That's fair. That's fair. All
So,
right. Well,
like,
since we
yeah.
got no meh, what's your bad?
My bad is literally just the way they killed Jim. Like, I fucking hated that. I hated that
Uh,
so much.
I can understand where you're coming from. To be
Yeah.
perfectly honest, I didn't actually have a bad because I
Okay.
really enjoyed this movie. But if I was gonna have a bad, I would have to say that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like, I really stretched for the bad, you know what I mean? So, it was like, yeah, the way Jim and Bill died, essentially, just, with all that cheap shot nonsense, you know what I mean? With that being said, what is John's highlight?
My highlight, man, and I hope you understand why I'm saying as big of a scene as I am. But that whole last fight in the street was fucking great. Was absolutely fucking great. The moment they shot Jim, shit went down, and
Yeah.
I was all about that shit.
Oh,
All
yeah.
about that shit.
That was good. That was good. Like, that's the kinda, like, fighting I wanna see in a movie. Like, you know what I mean? A nice, good 10-minute fucking battle, like.
True gunfight, a true Western gunfight.
Yeah,
That shit
so,
was prime.
I agree. I totally agree.
Um, I am so curious though, Zach. What's your letdown?
Okay, so, Zach's letdown for this week is the scene with Wiley. I was gonna say Coyote. Um,
Wile E. Coyote, I love it.
okay, so the scene with Wiley inside of, like, the house with the explosives, right?
Yeah.
I just, like, if TNT goes off that close to somebody, that's not how TNT works, right? And where's all the shrapnel, right? And then Idris Elba blows him up, and he gets hit by nothing. They were not standing that fucking far apart. You know what I mean? So if to pull a bad, that's the scene I'm gonna have to say because that shit made no sense with all the explosion. How the fuck did the house not fucking fall down? You know? There was a lot of TNT in a bag like that, right? The explosive. I would assume the explosion would have been a lot bigger. So
I guess. Who knows?
that's my bad.
Wow. That's a very good letdown, sir. That's a very I was very curious as to what you were gonna say the entire time I was watching this movie. I was like, there's gotta be something. Gotta be something. I wasn't expecting you to hate the gym death as much as you did either. So I'm fairly impressed, believe it or not.
Hmm.
Well, the highlights have been listed, the letdowns have been drawn. Think we need to discuss what we're watching next week. And
What are we watching next week?
we're gonna check out this new movie that just came out a couple weeks ago called The Bubble. It's brand new, and it's got like a handful of really good names in. It's got like David Duchovny from the X Files. It's got Pedro Pascal from Everything. Um, Karen Gillan's in it. I mean, you can't ask for a better cast. It's got a bunch of Saturday Night Live alums on it. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun looking movie. I mean,
Eagle Michael Key.
yeah. Fred Armisen. I mean, it's legit. It's got such a good comedic cast that you'd be hard pressed to find a bad person in the cast. I think.
Yeah,
So we're gonna check that out.
I'm definitely excited to check that movie out. It's been
Yeah,
on my watch list for a little bit, so
yeah. Same.
definitely.
So before we check out of here in a couple minutes, before we do that, we got one more thing that we have to do, and we have to show some love for the Dynamic Duel podcast. For again, we would not be here if it weren't for those guys. We really would love it if you would give them a listen to on Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you'd find your podcasts. You could also find them on YouTube, Dynamic Duel, Marvel versus DC. And yeah, give them a listen. Check them out. I guarantee you'll have a good time if you're in the nerddom like we are. Where else can you find them, Zach?
You can find them at dynamicduel.com. Their social medias is Dynamic Duel on pretty much everything, right? And yeah, their website has links to all that stuff, where they stream, everything. So yeah, definitely go check out dynamicduel.com.
Yes, sir. And speaking of social media, we have a couple places you can find us online as well. On Instagram, you can find us at MNWTB Podcast. On Twitter, you can find us at MNWTBoys. And on TikTok, I just posted our first one. It is at MNWTB Pod. What else do we got, Zach?
Um, I'm still working on the Facebook page. I've just been super busy, so I haven't gotten around to fully making it. We do have an account, so you can look us up if you want. Movie Night with the Boys. Um, and yeah, you can just make sure you like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Movie Night with the Boys! Exclamation mark.
And so, yeah, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, review, rate. You can do all those things on most of the podcast platforms you can find us on and on YouTube. Don't forget to set your notifications to go off for when we release a new video. And I think that's it. Do we have anything else?
Nope.
No? All right. Well, in that case, Zach, it's been real.
Deuces.
Deuces.
What else are you gonna say? Yes, kill me, kill me, kill me. Like, no, you're not.